Sometime this week, you're going to get into your car, pull out your phone, and type a destination into a GPS. A little blue line will appear on your screen, guiding you along flat black asphalt. You won't think twice about it. You will accelerate to 60 miles per hour, listen to a podcast, sip a coffee, and arrive at your destination having expended almost zero mental energy on the actual act of navigation. But for 99.9% of human history, that blue line didn't exist. For nearly all of our species' existence, there were no highway signs, no printed maps, no asphalt, no streetlights. If you wanted to go somewhere, you had to face a wall of pure, unyielding wilderness. You had to cross roaring rivers without bridges, navigate dense, primeval forests without trails, and step into vast, open territories where a single wrong turn meant you would never be heard from again. Yet, modern humans almost never think about the sheer miracle of ancient travel. For over 300,000 years, every single one of your ancestors had to move across this planet without a single road beneath their feet. They didn't just survive, they traveled immense distances. They crossed continents, survived ice ages, and found resources across lands that had never seen a shovel or a plow. So how did they actually do it? How did they get from point A to point B through a world of trackless forests, shifting sands, and open oceans? The answer changes everything we think we know about human geography, animal intelligence, and how our own brains are wired. It reveals that before we built the roads, the world itself was already whispering directions if we only knew how to listen. Let's start with the first roads, because humans didn't actually build them. Animals did.
For thousands of generations, before the first human ever cleared a path or laid a stone, massive herds of megafauna were carving deep, permanent tracks through the wilderness. Woolly mammoths, woodland bison, elk, and deer were the original highway engineers of the planet. These animals possessed a highly evolved instinctual understanding of topography. A herd of 1,000-pound bison doesn't climb a vertical cliff if there's a gentler slope nearby. They naturally found the easiest way through steep mountain passes, the safest shallow river crossings, and the most direct paths between vital water sources and mineral licks. Over thousands of years of seasonal migration, the repeated trampling of millions of heavy hooves packed the earth down so tightly that nothing could grow. They created clear, wide dirt highways through the densest brush. Consider the Buffalo Trace, also known as the Vincennes Trace. For centuries, millions of migrating American bison plodded through the wilderness, traveling from the open prairies of Illinois, across the woods of southern Indiana, and down to the salt licks of Kentucky. This was not a faint game trail. In many places, the Buffalo Trace was 12 to 20 feet wide, broad enough for two wagons to pass each other side by side. The ground was beaten so hard and the usage was so heavy that in some areas, the bison literally wore the path down through solid rock to a depth of 12 feet. When early human hunter-gatherers arrived in these regions, they didn't need to slash their way through the undergrowth. They simply stepped onto the bison paths. These trails became a godsend for human survival, acting as ready-made corridors through otherwise impassable terrain. Later, European traders, military regiments, and pioneer families used these exact
Animal paths to travel west. But here's what's truly fascinating. Those animal-engineered highways never went away. Today, if you drive along U.S. Route 150 between Vincennes, Indiana, and Louisville, Kentucky, you are driving on top of asphalt that was poured directly over the ancient footsteps of the bison. The highway is there because the bison decided thousands of years ago that it was the most efficient way to walk. Our modern highway system was paved by civil engineers who were simply following the wisdom of herds. But land travel, even on game trails, was grueling, dangerous, and incredibly slow.
On foot, a human can only travel about 15 to 20 miles a day, and you are limited by how much food, water, and gear you can physically carry on your back. If ancient humans wanted to move real weight, trade resources, or cover massive distances, they didn't look to the earth. You looked to the water. Water was the original frictionless superhighway system of the world. Think about the physics of a river. A river is a one-way conveyor belt. It does the physical work of moving you and your goods for free, using nothing but the pull of gravity. Unlike dense, tangled forests that push back against every single step, a river opens up the landscape, providing a clear, flat path through the heart of continents. To exploit these water highways, our ancestors developed one of the oldest and most elegant technologies in human history, the dugout canoe. In 1955, during the construction of the A28 motorway near the village of Pessie in the Netherlands, construction workers dug up a strange, hollowed-out log buried deep in the peat soil. They nearly tossed it into a dump truck, thinking it was just debris, but a local farmer named Hendrik Vanders noticed something unusual about its shape. He rescued it, and subsequent radiocarbon dating shocked the scientific world. This was the Pessie canoe, the oldest known boat on Earth. Constructed between 8040 BCE and 7510 BCE, nearly 10,000 years ago, the canoe was carved from a single Scots pine log. It was constructed by Mesolithic hunter-gatherers using nothing but simple flint, bone, and antler tools to hollow out the wood. At 3 meters long and 44 centimeters wide, some critics originally doubted that such a primitive vessel could actually be used for travel. But archaeologists built an exact replica of the Pessie canoe and put it in the water.
They found it was remarkably stable, highly maneuverable, and easily navigated the local waterways. For hunter-gatherers, the invention of the canoe changed the scale of the world. It allowed them to move resources that would be impossible to carry on land. Heavy stone tools, hides, fresh meat, and firewood, and transport them effortlessly over dozens of miles in a single day. Rivers, lakes, and coastlines didn't divide ancient peoples, they connected them. Long before we flattened the earth to build roads, the water lanes of the world were bustling with traffic. But what happened when there were no rivers, no animal trails, and no physical landmarks at all? What did you do when you were standing in the middle of a trackless, shifting desert? Or worse, looking out at the vast, empty blue horizon of the Pacific Ocean? In these featureless voids, physical pathways were non-existent. To travel, humans had to do something extraordinary. They had to turn the entire universe into a map. This is the art of wayfinding. Long before European sailors dared to venture far from their coastlines, and centuries before the invention of the magnetic compass or the sextant, Polynesian navigators were crossing thousands of miles of open ocean. They traveled in double-hulled voyaging canoes, navigating between tiny speck-like islands scattered across millions of square miles of the Pacific. They did this without a single scrap of paper, a single clock, or a single instrument. Instead, they read the natural world like an open book. A master Polynesian navigator could read star paths. They memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars along the horizon. Because stars rise and set at specific, predictable points on the compass, a navigator could look at a single star emerging from the dark water at night and know exactly which direction their canoe was pointing. If the sky became cloudy, they shifted their focus downward to the water itself. They could read the ocean swells. Swells are deep, rolling waves generated by distant trade winds that travel thousands of miles across the ocean in highly predictable directions. But when a swell hits an island, it bounces off, creating a distinct, subtle back. A navigator lying in the bottom of a canoe could feel the unique motion of these intersecting waves. By analyzing the pitch and roll of the vessel, they could detect the invisible echo of an island that was still hundreds of miles below the horizon. They watched the sky for a green tint on the underside of clouds, which signaled the reflection of a shallow lagoon below. They followed the flight paths of the frigate bird, a bird that cannot sleep on water and must return to land at night. If they saw a frigate bird carrying a fish at dusk, they followed its flight, knowing it was heading straight home. This was not guesswork, and it was not luck.
Wayfinding was a highly rigorous, multi-sensory science passed down through generations of oral history. The navigator didn't look at a map, they became the map, holding the entire layout of the ocean, the wind, and the stars inside their mind. On land, away from the water and the stars, the ultimate vehicle for ancient travel was the human body itself. Evolutionarily, humans are built for long-distance travel. We are one of the only species on Earth designed for persistence hunting. While a cheetah can run at incredible speeds for short bursts, it overheats quickly. Humans, however, have two unique advantages. We walk upright on two legs, which is incredibly energy efficient, and we can sweat, allowing us to dump heat on the move. Our ancestors could literally ruin prey to death, chasing animals over miles of hot savanna until the animal collapsed from heat exhaustion. But walking tens of thousands of steps a day over jagged volcanic rock, sharp thorns, and burning sand takes a massive toll on the human foot. To conquer the terrain, our ancestors had to protect their feet. In 1938, on a volcanic butte in the arid Great Basin of Oregon, archaeologist Luther Cressman entered Fort Rock Cave. Digging beneath a thick layer of volcanic ash left by the cataclysmic eruption of Mount Mazama nearly 7,000 years ago, he stumbled upon a cache of prehistoric items. Among them were dozens of pairs of woven sandals. They were the Fort Rock sandals, and they remain some of the oldest directly dated footwear ever discovered in the world. Radiocarbon testing revealed that these sandals were between 9,000 and 10,400 years old.
But what stunned researchers was not just their age, but their sophistication. These were not crude, temporary foot wraps made of rawhide or leaves. They were beautiful, twined shoes made from the tough fibers of sagebrush bark. They featured flat, tightly woven soles, protective toe flaps, and intricate tie ropes designed to wrap around the ankle and secure the shoe. They were engineered with a deep, intuitive understanding of human biomechanics. They provided traction, cushioned the heel, protected the toes, and allowed the foot to breathe in hot weather. These sagebrush sandals allowed our ancestors to transform their feet into durable, long-distance machines, enabling them to traverse hundreds of miles of rugged volcanic terrain in search of food, water, and trade. Long before we had tires, we had the perfect tire for the human foot. So, what changed? What killed this ancient, intimate relationship with the landscape? The answer's simpler than you'd think. The wheel. We often talk about the wheel as the greatest invention in human history, but there is a catch that we rarely mention. A wheel is completely useless without a flat surface. If you take a heavy wooden cart with wheels into a wild forest, a rocky mountain pass, or a swamp, it is not an asset. It is a liability. It gets stuck instantly, breaks its axle, and sinks into the mud. For most of human history, a sled or a pack animal was far more practical than a wheeled cart. To make the wheel useful, humanity had to do something unprecedented. We had to flatten the earth. The Romans were the first to do this on a massive continental scale. To move their heavy armies quickly across their empire, they constructed over 50,000 miles of paved stone roads. They cut down forests, filled in swamps, blasted through rock, and laid down flat, straight lines of stone. This was the birth of the modern road, and it completely changed our relationship with the landscape. Traveling stopped being an active sensory dialogue with the terrain and became a passive transaction. You no longer had to watch the plants, follow the animal tracks, or feel the slope of the land. You just had to stay on the stone. And here is a linguistic clue to this shift. The word route comes from the Old French route, which is derived from the Latin ruta via. This literally translates to a broken way or a path opened by force. For our ancestors, a route was not a peaceful given. It was a path that had to be forcibly broken through the forest, a violent rupture of the wild wilderness. Traveling was an act of courage, an active engagement with a living world that did not want you to pass.
But once we paved the world, we stopped breaking the wild. We simply bypassed it. But here is the part that modern science is only beginning to understand. When we paved the world, and when we eventually handed our navigation over to digital satellites, we didn't just change how we travel, we changed our brains. Deep inside your brain, there is a small seahorse shaped structure called the hippocampus. This ancient part of the brain is responsible for two primary functions: creating long term memories and building cognitive maps, the internal spatial representation of the physical world that allows you to navigate. For 300,000 years, the human hippocampus was kept in a state of high performance. To survive, you had to constantly update your cognitive map. You had to remember where the safe river crossings were, where the water holes lay, which star pointed north, and how to get back to your shelter before the sun went down. A famous groundbreaking study conducted on London taxi drivers proved just how plastic and powerful this system is. To get their license, London taxi drivers must master the knowledge, memorizing the layout of 25,000 streets and thousands of landmarks within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross. Brain scans of these drivers revealed that their hippocampi were significantly larger than those of the general public, and the longer a driver had been on the job, the larger their hippocampus had grown. The brain physically adapted to the demands of active navigation. But what happens when we stop navigating?
When you turn on your GPS, you aren't navigating. You are simply following a set of turn-by-turn instructions. Your brain enters what scientists call passive autopilot. You don't look at the mountains, you don't look at the sun, and you don't build a cognitive map of your surroundings. A study published in Scientific Reports investigated the long-term effects of habitual GPS use. The researchers found that people who relied heavily on GPS for navigation experienced a significant decline in their non-GPS navigation skills over time, accompanied by a reduction in hippocampal activity. By outsourcing our sense of direction to a tiny blue dot on a screen, we are literally de-skilling our minds. We are allowing an evolutionary superpower, one that kept our ancestors alive for hundreds of thousands of years, to quietly wither away. We traded a deep, instinctual conversation with the earth for a blue line on a screen. Today, modern humans travel faster, safer, and more comfortably than any of our ancestors could have ever dreamed. We can cross oceans in hours and traverse continents in days, all while sitting in climate-controlled seats. But in conquering the road, we lost something profound. When we drive today, we don't look at the stars to find our way. We don't feel the swells of the land beneath our feet. And we don't read the paths that the animals spent millennia carving for us. We don't even look out the window to see the world we're passing through. We just stare at our screens, follow the voice, and wait to arrive. We have conquered the wilderness, paved over the traces of our ancestors, and put the map in our pockets.